Good evening, everybody. I'm in the shop today getting my Anschutz 64 model 1416 cleaned up, and I thought I'd film a quick video to showcase this double set trigger. I talked about filming it previously and I never got around to it. It was one of my first videos I showcased this rifle. This rifle is absolutely gorgeous. Like I said, it's a 1969 with double set trigger. Quite unusual, with a fancy walnut checkered finish. It's wearing a Nikon 2-7 scope. And I mentioned in my actual shooting video that if I could only have one rifle, it would probably be this one. It's a good balance of everything. Just a beautiful rimfire. Has a 5-shot Anschutz magazine, and I don't know if you can make that out, but the sides are quite shiny because I had to actually remove some material to get it to fit correct. This is the magazine that came with the rifle. It's an original old school Anschutz. I think it's a 69, like to match the rifle, I mean. I had to relieve some material because the fit was so tight, like you'd rip your fingers off trying to get it out. And my other Anschutz magazine said no trouble, so it was definitely the magazine. So I just relieved a little material, polished it up, and it's still kind of tight, but it fits good. Anyway, so this double set trigger is a little bit unique compared to most 64s in that the double set hunter style trigger is held in the stock a little bit differently than a regular 64, which would have it attached to the actual action. The 64 double set has actually the stock as the, I'll call it the lower receiver that holds the double set trigger into place. Kind of like if you watched my Anschutz and Larson explanation video. The trigger guard and the trigger is all in one, and it kind of sits in the bottom of the stock and acts as kind of like an upwards hammer on the actual sear surfaces on the receiver. So this is not really that much different, although it kind of is. So I've already relieved the action screws from their location. You've got a forward, mid, and a rear. So you have a forward, mid, rear, and they're all different. And like, you know, the typical Anschutz screws are very nice. I won't call them as nice as, you know, some of the Valmet's one that we featured. The steel is a little bit softer. They're smaller, of course. Like these are quite tiny compared. Now, of course, this is a Sporter Action, so, but even the 54 screws are much smaller than like on a Anschutz and Larson. These are, I would just call these typical kind of machine screws. Anyway, I relieved them, and then the action pops out of the stock. So, just like the Anschutz and Larson, you'll have to forgive any sort of dirt you see. Like I said, I hadn't cleaned it since last time. Just like the Anschutz and Larson, or any double set trigger. On this one, of course, you have a magazine well that you wouldn't have on a single shot, but you have the actual sear surfaces. And what's unique about this one, and we've got some dirt already, folks. What's unique about this one, get that out of there, is you actually have a roller bearing on these. And like I said, you get like a Anschutz and Larson handmade basement by a couple of old fellas type craftsmanship. This is like always over-engineered space shuttle stuff, and so the German crowd made a world of bearing on it for smoothness, obviously. But when you look at the actual construction, it's just stamped. I won't call it stamped sheet metal, but it's just formed. It's like folded over metal. Nothing like the Anschutz and Larson or Valmet, which is machined from a block. This is just folded over steel. Functions fine. It's a great trigger. It's the last since '69, but not the same level of craftsmanship. I would say probably more efficient, and you know, Anschutz is a large company and that sort of thing. So this is probably for cost-cutting measures, and like if it works, who cares, right? I would say that like the actual sear surfaces are going to be case-hardened steel and highly polished like everything else in Anschutz. I'll quickly point out that this one's drilled and tapped from a factory for a side-mounted aperture sight. And those screws have never been turned as far as I can tell. Anyway, have a good look at it, and like I said, that's typical 64 and 54 magwell, and then the actual sear surface. You can see how that works. So like if you remember the Anschutz and Larson, it was a cantilever effect, and I pushed on the actual cantilever and you could see it. Where on this one, they've added roller bearings and kind of like a circular part at the bottom. I don't know if you can make that out. And so as the double set hits it, it releases and trips the sear. Because the bolt on this is a standard 64 style bolt. There's nothing different about this bolt, even though it has double set compared to any other 64 action. It's the same. You guys will recognize it right away, so I'm not really trying to focus on that too much. So anyway, so that's the kind of difference there. The roller bearing is quite unique. And here we have the inletting of the stock, and then you can see down below, I don't want to lose that, but you can see down below here you have the double set trigger portion, which is strikingly similar to any sort of double set trigger. There's no difference between this one. The only difference is the scale. Like compared to the Schultz and Larson, if you have a look at that again, you can see the scale. So there's these little square nuts, okay? Or nut, I should say. And it fits right there. I don't know if you can make that out inside the stock. So this fits in kind of like a milled out section of the stock, and so that's the center action screw. And so this is like the capture nut inside. Okay? So like in theory, when I strip the action, you'd leave that in, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it falling out on you, or that sort of screw. But anyway, trigger guard comes off, and this is a very tight fit, as you would expect from an Anschutz. And then you've got this double set trigger little job here, and I just lightly push it forward from the top, and it comes out in this beautiful way. Get a cloth and wipe this off here. Okay, so this is the Anschutz Sporter style double set trigger. You'll find these on single shots and 64s, and it's very hunter-esque. Like it reminds me, when the first time I saw one, it reminds me of like an old Bruno. Very similar. They're probably copied design. So if you remember in the Schultz and Larson, there was a polished hammer on top, and so when you set the front, the rear would engage. Okay. So this one's a little bit different because it's not dry fireable like once it's out of the rifle, but the function of it is the same. So you set the rear. I'll try to get it to do it for you. Okay, so you set the rear. Okay. So very hard. And then if you watch that hammer, and like I've got it very, very low, but the same kind of idea. See how that works? Okay, so it's the same exact principle. And like this is the adjustment screw, just like on the Schultz and Larson, and like I have it set, geez, it's like very light, just a few ounces. It's too light, really. I think the last time I had it out, I was playing with it. But the actual piece is highly machined, and you can see some machine marks on the side where you wouldn't see just like a Schultz and Larson. But it's quite a thick piece. It's all machined with adjustment screws. So once you find your zone, you would tighten that little, and it would not back out on you. And the springs, of course, are not the same as a Schultz and Larson. They're, you know, German genius in them. There is a flat coil spring inside, but like all in all, when you compare the two, it's kind of like a miniaturized, streamlined for production version, but brilliant. And one thing I like about them is their elegant trigger blades. I just think these are so beautifully done, because the rest of the gun doesn't look handmade, doesn't look handcrafted where somebody individually made those, but those triggers always reminded me of somebody, you know, painstaking with a file getting those profiles right. They're absolutely beautiful triggers. Anyway, so we'll do that one more time. And like I should say, I talked about it in the actual shooting videos. One of the complaints of this rifle, or the double set trigger in general, is the reach. So like from a pistol grip point of view, when you're in position, you know, like I've got pretty large hands, and you can see that like you don't get a nice like that, you get a side purchase on it. Whereas if it's a rear trigger, you can, so if you're like a real stickler for trigger position, this would be not the greatest for you. But I have to say, like in my experience, is like, sorry, when I set it, okay, when you set it like that, and I'm just gonna stick my finger in so I don't, when you set it like that, like if you've got it set at decent enough, you just approach it from the side. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't need a full, the only time you would is because this trigger is settable, like is fireable with just the rear trigger, and then you don't have a problem. But like the only time I could see you ever needing to do that is if you had it set too high, but then what's the point of it? Like the weight, I mean, the pull weight. So I don't see what the point would be of a double set trigger. Although the design is strange, because like they wanted to leave you enough room to pull this, but they probably could have, well, maybe not, because you're quite close. I don't know, being Germans, they probably figured all that out. German manufacturers, I mean, geniuses. Anyway, I'll give you another shot of the inlet. This is for the sight block. And this rifle is free-floated. It's also pillar bedded from the factory. You can see the light in the stock. I got it like that, and it's like a stain. So I think it was just the original. Maybe they coated it with something. It's definitely darker than, like, this rifle's been refinished, but the original color wasn't like that. So I think it's almost like maybe it's like a preservative. I'm not sure. Maybe it was a previous owner. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's how it goes in there. Pretty straightforward, and the little square nut, like I said, rides in that little groove and supports it. And when I talked about it compared to the Valmet, there's a good shot of an Anschutz inlet. And like, it's well done and it's nice, but on the sides it's not finished or high gloss like it is in the Valmet. Kind of see it there. You can see a pillar there. But this, you know, the walnut's beautiful. You know, overall it's a beautiful thing. So that's basically, when it comes to the actual firing of it, it's exactly the same as the Schultz & Larsen, and I'll show you guys real quick how that works. So you set the trigger, okay, and then in the gun, it's like this, okay, and so that little roller bearing, and so when you pull the trigger, that's how it works. And you saw that it fired there. But, like, you know, there's, again, the same on the Schultz & Larsen, it had a spring you could adjust. There's one here. I've never adjusted it. And then you can see, well, I hope you can see on the surfaces, there's absolutely no wear visible, despite all the cycling of this. Like, there's no shiny spots in the blue from the pivot because it's obviously been well designed. So there's some wear on the side where you'd engage the safety, but there's no actual wear on any of the surfaces. And like, a roller bearing is an absolutely genius thing to do, because that will just help preserve it. And like, there is no, I can't feel any side to side movement in that you know, that pivot there in the bearing. There's a slight amount of wear that I see on the edges, but I don't know if that's actually just manufacturing issue. You can kind of see there's some high spots there. So I'm not quite sure if that's just from the manufacturing point of view, or that's just from age, or there's some rough finishing on the edge of this, which is the opposite of the actual sear contact surface. But, you know, typical German craftsmanship. And, you know, like a 64 action, there's very little thickness difference or stoutness between a 64 action or this vintage 64 action and like a Savage Mark II or a Marlin. The tube thickness is not very stout. It's just typical. So Anschutzes get their, you know, their pedigree from their accuracy, because you know, like the fit and finish is good, but it's not magical. Look, the quality is there, of course, and I'm not critiquing it by any means, because like I said, this is one of my favorite rifles of all time, and if I could only have one, it'd be this one, because it just does everything super well. Anyway, so I thought I'd show you, and there's my fit of the magazine. So, like, it's nice and tight, and then like Anschutz, these buttons are the worst ever, right? Like, they're hard on your fingers, but because inside the stock there's just like this knurling you see, but you can see now it functions fine. But in the beginning, like, you'd have to really gorilla pull it to get it out. But anyway, I thought I'd show you guys real quick the relationship with the double set trigger on the Anschutz 64 Sporter, and you can kind of see what's involved with one of those. And like, you don't need to worry about too much this sort of thing failing. I would say that like, it has a decent amount of parts, but like, you can't find parts for these anymore, and so you'd be stuck manufacturing just like you would, even though it's an Anschutz and they, you know, sold a lot more of these than a Schultz & Larsen, you'd still be stuck trying to find parts for this. And because of the stock and the actual, this portion of the double set trigger, you would have to buy an entire assembly for a regular 64 trigger and then bolt it on to make it work if you wanted to replace it. And then your stock wouldn't be compatible because of the inlet for the actual housing itself. So it's kind of unique when you buy one of these. But like, I shoot it like and enjoy it. I don't like count my rounds thinking I don't want to wear it out, because, well, who wouldn't want to shoot this? Anyway, I thought I'd share. It's a super rad rifle. I haven't had it out in a while, just because I've been focusing on other things, and the combination with the scope, it's just an absolute dream. It's kind of an opposite, like, it's counterintuitive when you have a scope like this, because these turrets are so massive, so it doesn't like when I first got it, I was like, oh, I don't know if it would suit it, but it kind of does, because you can dial real quick, and the turrets are set up for, I think I talked about like stingers or something like that, so they don't really make sense for standard velocity, which it likes. But the kind of the drop reticle in it, you know, you can find the hash mark that works, and it's super fast, super easy to do. The turrets are spring loaded for 0, so you can just like turn and set your 0 once you have a different round and just count your clicks. So super easy to read. And then I got some old Weaver steel rings in it, which is strange. I don't know. I don't know why I have those on there. They kind of don't suit the scope, but anyway, maybe I picked them for a reason. I don't remember. Anyway, super awesome gun. Thought I'd show that to you guys. And like, you know, after so many rounds, there's very little fouling that falls through with that. I should probably say that, because when it's in the stock, you know, this is a bolt gun, of course, but it's kind of like protected by all the assembly here, and so you don't get a lot of dirt and debris in it. You just get a little bit, but like on the actual surfaces themselves, it stays relatively clean. And never had a problem with it whatsoever. Anyway, I thought I'd share that, and I hope this gives you guys an idea on how Anschutz Sporter double set works. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.